we're interested in quality of life. If my husband has 60 days or 60 years left, they should be good years.
Jan, how did you find carnivore?
Well, there is nothing more dangerous than a retired woman with access to the internet. And my husband and I had a bit of a shock when he was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. And I first started out trying to feed him everything I could, fearing horrible weight loss. And the picture you get of cancer patients was I don't want him losing weight. Um, but I went to the internet and I started researching diets for cancer patients. And I made my poor husband eat broccoli sprouts that I sprouted myself for a while. I made this horrendous elixir out of orange, grapefruit, tangerine, lemon, and lime rinds and put that in his freshly squeezed orange juice every morning. And then I found out I was feeding him sugar. Um, and sugar kept coming up as an enemy. So I started our journey by eliminating sugar, artificial sweeteners, processed foods from our diets. And we did that for about 2 months. Um, and during the time, I was still looking on the internet, trying to find some truths that might help us get through this. And carnivore diet kept popping up. An awful lot of it was about weight loss and people who'd lost amazing amounts of weight, but also a lot of the autoimmune issues were coming up. I had had IBS most of my adult life. Um, so I was intrigued about my own health and carnivore. And then Thomas Seyfried came up uh, doing the cancer research and claiming all cancers to be a metabolic disease. Um, Cancer patients who basically still had cancer but were leading a reasonably good quality of life while on carnivore and prolonging their lives. Um, I'm not foolish enough to think we all live forever. And I know that at this point, I'm 74, my husband's 77. We're not looking to live forever, but quality of life was really important to me. I was very grateful that my husband's brain is 100% with us. I didn't want to lose that. Um, so the more carnivore things that came up and the more I watched, and your story was one of the first ones that I watched, um, I was intrigued enough that the whole issue of try us for 30 days and see what you think. Um, and I went upstairs and looked my husband in the eye and said, I am going to do this crazy diet for 30 days because I don't want to be a little old lady in a nursing home dealing with IBS issues. And he surprised me greatly by saying, me too. I will do it with you, which may just have been self-preservation because I'm cooking, but uh, but he was willing to do it. And basically, I would really recommend to anyone who wants to try carnivore to get the sugar addiction out of the way first. The fact that we had gotten rid of the sugar and the processed foods made the transition to meat animal based diet, I think, a great deal easier. Um, we did not have amazing instant results by any means, although very quickly I got rid of my acid reflux medication, which became obvious to me I wasn't needing that. And that was less than 30 days. Um, One of the other interesting changes that I noticed right away was I was waking up earlier in the morning without an alarm clock, which never used to happen. Um, I was functioning in the morning. I could read challenging articles. I could balance a checkbook. I could do things that normally my standard reply when I went to work and people asked how I was, I would say mostly awake. And they knew not to give me tough things before 10 a.m. And all of a sudden that was gone. And my husband and I have been married 53 years. And it was a horrible adjustment to have him have a wife who was wide awake way earlier than he ever expected me to be. Um, And I kind of went on from there to notice some of my dry skin was going away. Um, the IBS symptoms still came and went. Um, we have been carnivores for more than 10 months now, and I'm finally seeing some positive aspects of that going away. I was kind of disappointed when I just started carnivore when I went for my yearly physical with my family doctor. And I asked him if he had any other patients who were carnivores. And his reply was, "What is that?" And I went, "Okay." um, and I told him my goal was to be off my blood pressure medication, to be off my high cholesterol meds, um, and that I expected in a year to show up and be the strongest, healthiest little old lady he had in his practice. And he started spouting about cholesterol would be out of control. You can't poop without fiber, all the standard things you hear. And I just smiled and said, "Well, that's not what I'm reading. That's not what I'm hearing about. So we'll see." And he just kind of looked at me like I was a little off and said, "Well, if all those things come to pass in a year, I'll be on that diet the day after I see you." So I'm hoping he's true to his word because I weaned myself off the statins. I weaned myself off my blood pressure medication. Previously stated the acid reflux medicine went. So any prescription medications I am off of. The one missing piece of the puzzle was my husband's cancer treatment. The oncologist, when we proudly announced we were carnivores, looked puzzled and then kind of shrugged her shoulders and said, "Well, I guess protein won't hurt you." And I thought, well, all right. I asked her if she'd heard of Thomas Seyfried and his work, and she hadn't. Um, and so we just kind of kept going, doing our thing. Um, in the US, you cannot get pain medications without going to a pain clinic. Ordinary doctors can no longer prescribe them for prolonged periods of time. And one of our routine visits to the pain clinic, they noticed that my husband had been losing some weight. And we said, "Oh, that's fine. We're both on the carnivore diet. We've both lost some weight." And the nurse kind of wrinkled her nose and said, "One of the doctors here is a carnivore and he puts a raw egg in his coffee every morning and it's disgusting." And so I filed away the fact that the doctor there was a carnivore. And a couple more months went by, and the end of our next quarterly visit at the pain clinic, I asked if we could make an appointment to see that doctor. And the nurse kind of looked at me like, "Why?" And I said, "Well, we're carnivores and we'd really like to speak to a medical person who has heard of the diet and has been on it." And she said, "Oh, he'll love that." So we did make an appointment to see him. Uh, he was very gracious. First thing he did was give us paperwork to order the 24-hour urine collection for iodine deficiencies that he wanted us both to take, and arranged for us to come back and see him with the results of those tests. He also recommended his personal physician in a holistic clinic outside of Detroit, and we made arrangements to go see them. And he also highly recommended the nose to tail carnivore, you got to eat organs, and recommended the Heart and Soil website, Dr. Paul Saladino's business. And so we ordered those and started taking them. Had the most extensive blood work we've ever had done, either one of us, at the holistic clinic. Um, Found out some interesting things about mutated genes and what we were taking too much of and not enough of. And I think that's going to get us metabolically on the right track, both of us. They were very positive about the support cancer patients need through the gut and some wonderful supplements to get him stronger. Our oncologist is thinking it's time for him to get off his oral chemo medicine to the stronger intravenous treatment. And the doctor at the holistic clinic recommended that we get him on supplements for at least 3 months and kind of get him straightened around so that his body is strong enough to not succumb to the poisons necessary to kill cancer. Um, and I found that very hopeful because, again, we're interested in quality of life. If my husband has 60 days or 60 years left, they should be good years. And so I'm feeling very good. On the weight loss front, my husband, whose cancer spread to the bone, so he's basically living with a fractured spine. Um, he has lost 35 to 40 pounds, and the man is very inactive. Um, and the exciting thing is where the weight comes off of. Mostly his gut. He's all excited he can look down and see the floor without any tummy in the way. It's interesting. And I thought I was a normal, chubby little old lady. I didn't have that much weight to lose. I've lost 36 pounds in the first 6 months, and since then, the weight has been holding steady. And the hardest part for a 74-year-old lady to deal with is how much longer do I have left to live? Can I afford to buy all new clothes? So it's been a very interesting journey. It's had a lot of positives. Um, Nothing that it's not like a miraculous instant thing. You have to work at it. And I was fascinated at how satisfying eating meat is. I was really rather astonished that in the morning I make us a wonderful breakfast of bacon and eggs, and I shred Parmigiano Reggiano on my husband's cheese, and we have this wonderful breakfast. And when we started, I was still trying to do 3 meals a day. But we get to noontime, and we were both thinking, "I'm not hungry. I'm still feeling really good." And so we fell into have our nice big breakfast, and then someplace between 4 and 5 when we were hungry, I'd make dinner. And so we've been doing the 2 meals a day. Um, Initially, I was worried about it's going to cost us a fortune to eat good meat. Um, but if you've been to a supermarket lately and priced a loaf of bread and a box of cereal and those wonderful cookies I used to buy, um, those prices are as crazy as any good piece of meat. So the cost of it has not been outrageous. Um, and we're both doing well and feeling well. And about, I guess, 8 months into the diet, we both looked at each other and said, this is how we're going to eat for the rest of our life. This isn't a temporary thing. This just makes sense. And that's kind of our story.
Nice. I've got a lot of things I'd love to follow up on, but one of the first things I wanted to ask you about was regarding how your husband's doing. So you talked about some of the things that have improved for you, like the acid reflux is gone, and you're waking up earlier, and you've got more energy and that kind of thing. But your husband being inactive due to his condition, how is he actually feeling relative to when he started doing carnivore?
I think he's doing quite a bit better.
Hmm.
One of the really neat things is at first in his illness he was very weak because he was so inactive, and he fell a couple of times, not drastic horrible falls. Mostly he just sort of crumpled or oozed to the floor, but that was a real problem because prior to the weight loss I was not able to help him get up. So if I didn't have a son and son-in-law close at hand, it would I would have to call EMT or somebody to help get him up. Um, One of the neat things about being on carnivore is that after I gave him what for falling down when I couldn't get him up, and if he really wanted to stay at home with me and eat my wonderful cooking and my wonderful eggs in the morning, he was going to have to make an effort. And so he started doing leg exercises. I mean, just little mini squats in front of the bathroom vanity. And he's been doing those regularly and has been able to get up out of the chair with much more ease. One of the other peculiar things is there was always something better to do for me than exercise. And all of a sudden, I now enjoy exercising. When the roads or weather are awful, I have a wonderful exercise bike and I get on that for 35 minutes or so every day and I look forward to it and I actually feel better after I'm done. And I think he's had a little of that with his little mini stretching and squat exercises that have helped him. So I think it's been a real positive, and I also think his outlook is better.
It really does feel to me like you almost feel compelled to exercise, compelled to move, compelled to do things, whereas, in the before times, you wouldn't have been. So I certainly get that feeling, um, or have the same kind of experience as you. Um, how long were you on statins?
Oh dear. I was in my mid 40s when the doctor tested my cholesterol, and I remember it clearly. He said, "Your total cholesterol is 346." And I just smiled at him and said, "Is that bad?" And he put me on statins at that point. So it was close to 30 years that I was taking those.
Now that you've well, actually, how long ago did you stop the statin? Was it like 5 months
Um,
ago, 4 months ago?
it was, I think I took the last of those right before the 6 month mark of being a carnivore.
Okay.
And then
So,
after that, another 2 months, I had weaned myself off my blood pressure medication.
oh, I
And the
see.
last time
Okay.
I was at the doctor, my blood pressure was lower than it ever was while I was taking the medication.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, r- Regarding your cholesterol, though, stopping taking the statins, and also being carnivore, has your cholesterol gone back up again? And
Yes.
okay, but
The
that's something you're
holistic,
not concerned about now.
well, the doctor at the holistic clinic, cholesterol was one of the things she tested, and the total cholesterol was 242. And her comment was, considering your diet and the fact that your good cholesterol is 75 and your triglycerides are good. She said, the other number I'm not concerned about. She said, I'm very happy with you. Now, my family doctor, who I'll see in February, might not be so happy, but I don't care.
You said you're about 6 months in, so that means that you stopped the statin about 4 months ago,
Right.
right? So have you noticed any changes since stopping the statin that you may attribute to the statin that had been there for the last 30 or so years?
No, I was pretty fortunate in that if I had side effects from the statin, there was nothing really noticeable. Um, I mean, considering some of the studies that I've read that have come out on the statins, it's probably because they weren't doing a darn thing to help me or hurt me.
Good. Yeah, nice assessment. Well, congratulations on getting off so many meds. I mean, acid reflux meds gone, statins gone, blood pressure meds gone. Am I missing something there?
No, I think that was the list.
That's so, um, like, you're taking no meds at all now?
Well, I'm taking some supplements. I am
Oh, okay.
taking the heart and soul freeze-dried liver because as much as I'd love to, liver has never been my friend. My taste buds just can't handle that.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things you either really like it or you really, really don't, right?
I really, really don't.
Yeah. How has your family and your friends reacted to the way your husband and yourself are eating now?
Well, I think they're tired of me talking about how wonderful it is. Um, when I've brought it up to a number of friends, my most common reaction from people is, "Oh, I could never give up sugar." Um, and I don't know, it's interesting. I mean, it took the shock of a cancer diagnosis to get me to change. Um, and I think for an awful lot of people, it's such a drastic change, and there are so many doctors who are not on board at all. I have a good friend with a family history of diabetes who has been told she's pre-diabetic by her doctor. Um, and I just smiled sweetly and said, look into the carnivore diet. I said, there are a number of people who used to be insulin users that are no longer doing that because of the carnivore diet. And she looked up just enough on the internet to find out that the Diabetes Association says don't eat red meat. Um, and she just decided that was what she was going to follow. And I'm not sure what it would take for the average person to throw away all of the nutritional garbage that's been taught erroneously for the past 35 years and to jump out on something that seems crazy. But I
Mm.
do talk about it, and um, a number of people that are terribly overweight that I've mentioned how good this is um, get offended and think they're being body shamed. And I sure don't want that. I just want everybody to be healthy. And if anybody out there can avoid a cancer diagnosis by eating wonderful steak and beautiful salmon, um, I think it makes an awful lot of sense. And I've read just enough to be dangerous. Physiology and your gut and the carnivore code and all these unbelievably technical things of which I only remember vague ideas. I sure don't remember the vocabulary and don't know the names of mitochondria and lipids and all those other things. But it's enough to understand how important the process is for the whole body that your digestion and what you're putting into your body is just amazing. And if you don't believe in God, you've got to do that research because I cannot believe that the human body in all its intricacies was an evolutionary accident. There is such purpose in everything that happens, and the human body is truly an amazing, amazing creation.
Yeah, it is indeed. And the thing is, when you start to realize what is wrong with all the what we've been taught over the years about nutrition and what's wrong with the nutrition science, it's like all the dominoes really start to fall into place. And you go, of course, this makes sense. This is what we should
Yeah,
always have been eating, right?
absolutely. And a couple of people I've used the wonderful example is if we were meant to eat plants, we'd have stomachs like cows. And we don't. We have stomachs like predators. And that's the other important thing about the carnivore diet is our brain is 80% fat. And without that important fat, we lose the intellect. And I truly believe that's got to be one of the reasons behind the fact that many different kinds of dementias, Alzheimer's, are running rampant because we are not giving our brains what they need.
Yeah. That's right. And they call dementia now like type 3 diabetes, right?
Yeah,
But sadly, the misinformation about the fact you need sugar, your brain needs sugar is still out there so much, That's what made me kind of doubt myself on my first try at a low carb diet. I worked with an ex nutritionist or dietitian, and he was telling me, you need to be eating sugar, your brain needs that as fuel. And I just went, okay, well, maybe he knows what he's talking about. So, I'm wrong. And there was not enough people around me doing a low carb style of living at the time. So I just gave up.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a number of my friends that look at me and say, "Oh my God, you're so thin. This is not healthy. You need to be doing something to gain weight." And I just smile and say, "Well, I feel pretty darn good and I'm stronger than I ever was. I've got little old lady biceps and never used to have those before. So I not seeing a downside."
Mm. I think one of the things is, if you're eating in a particular way and you have dramatic weight loss, people could be concerned. But then when you contrast that with, I'm feeling better than I ever have before, plus I'm gaining muscle without even trying, then it seems like it's a very, very positive thing, right? Because if you're counting calories and eating a plant-based diet in order to lose weight, you don't gain muscle naturally that way, right?
Right. No. And the weight loss part of it has been very, very interesting because I kind of yo-yoed my entire adult life between 130, 155, and when I started carnivore, I was 154, and I now weigh 118, which I didn't think was possible because that's what I weighed in high school. And while I was losing this weight, I felt like I was eating like a pig. I mean, the instructions with carnivore is you eat until you feel full, you don't count calories, you don't worry about portions, you just eat until you're full. I was doing that, and all of a sudden my clothes were getting baggy. And I thought, well, this is odd. And the other exciting thing, which I don't usually share with gentlemen, but hell, this is the internet, right? It's the only diet I've ever been on where the first thing I didn't lose was a bra size. I lost all my weight off hips, thighs, stomach. Um, I mean, even at 74, a girl likes to look like a girl. So I thought it was the greatest thing ever.
That's so interesting to hear because I know, like, it's not something I've ever had to think about on a diet, but I know from female friends talking about a diet, they often say the difficulty they experience is they can't spot reduce, right? Or they can't lose weight in
Right.
the areas that they want to lose weight. It always comes off in the wrong parts.
Right.
And so that's super interesting to hear.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
found it absolutely amazing and fun because uh, I'm certainly not at the point where I'm running around in a bikini or doing wet t-shirt contests or anything crazy like that. But it's nice to feel svelte for the first time in my life. I mean, I put on clothes and I feel very happy about how I look, and I'm enjoying exercising. Um, I am doing a little work to build those muscles. For Christmas, I had my son buy me 5 pound hand weights so I could retire the 3 pounders. Um, but I mean, people these days talk a lot about body image, and I just feel good about myself in so many ways, emotionally, physically. Um, it's been a super positive experience all the way around.
Very nice. Very nice. So, um, we've just passed Christmas. So,
Don't bring up
How did you do
Christmas
over the
cookies.
Christmas period?
Um, well, I decided to torture myself. Um, for many, many, many years, I have made lots of wonderful, delicious Christmas cookies, and I would give those as gifts. And this year, I decided that I could handle it because throughout the carnivore thing, I had not been really tempted by sugar. I hadn't fallen off the wagon much at all. Um, I did have a piece of my granddaughter's birthday cake, but kept things under control. And so I started out making cookies. And I was doing pretty well until I found a new recipe I tried and then realized that I couldn't eat it. And therefore, I would not know whether I was giving people good cookies or not. So there came the justification to eat a cookie. And I did have a prime rib roast for Christmas dinner for the kids. My daughter brought green bean casserole and macaroni and cheese. There were some leftover Christmas cookies around on the table. And I did have a small helping of both the sides that my daughter bought with my big piece of wonderful meat. Um, and I did break down and have a couple cookies after the meal was over. But by and large, I did not have horrible adverse effects from the little bit of carbs and sugars I had. Um, and the day after Christmas, I was ready to go back and eating like I should. But I still have guilt over some of those Christmas cookies.
Nice. So, um, Jan, if someone comes to you and says, "Look, Jan, you're doing so well. How can I get started with this?" How would you recommend they get started?
Well, I think because the sugar addiction is very real and difficult, that if you can kind of start the way I did in, okay, all sugar is bad, all artificial sweeteners are bad, seed oils are horrible. When you go to the store, you start reading ingredients. And my rule when I started this was if it has more than 3 ingredients listed, don't buy it. Um, I had the advantage of that point of always loving to cook. And so if I was going to have tomato sauce, I was going to make my own. I wasn't going to go to the jar. And I had been gluten free in an effort to relieve some of the IBS symptoms. I'd been gluten free for 5 years. And no offense to the gluten free people, but the bread isn't the same. The cookies aren't the same. Gluten free is just not the same. And so I already figured, if I have to eat the thing called gluten free bread and I'm hating every minute of it, why am I eating it? And the gluten free pasta, I'd finally found a brand that was okay, but my husband never liked any of the gluten free options that were around. So I'd almost given up breads and a lot pastas and a lot of those carbs already. Um, Eating the Great American Diet on Monday and starting carnivore on Tuesday has to be very difficult. Um, so I would recommend the very least that you do is try to get the sugar addiction behind you and then maybe go to low carb and then go to carnivore. Because I mean, there's a lot of evidence that the keto diet is the next best thing to carnivore. And if you can kind of transition into keto and then carnivore, I think that would be easier for most people.
And so, Jan, do you have a way for people to contact you, like Instagram or YouTube or anything like that?
Not really. Other than email, um, I'm kind of your typical little old lady in that respect. I'm not super tech savvy. And I love YouTube and going there and reading all of them and I will answer or put comments in on some of the things if I figure I have 2 cents that's worth it. Um, but I'm not really out there on my own at all. No.
No worries. Well, Jan, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and also your husband's story. And I wish you both all of the best. And I hope maybe we could do an update interview in a few months' time and see how you're doing and how your husband's doing, if that's okay.
Well, I would love that, and I hope we have nothing but wonderful things to tell you. Thank you for being out there and tech savvy enough to do these things.